And at some point he said, Graham, he was an Irish guy, Graham, write a whole album of hate songs about Mercury. Write a whole album. And I thought, yeah, great idea. And I wrote Mercury Poisoning, and I said, you know, Dave, I think I've covered it with this one song. I don't know. And I was writing Squeezing Out Sparks material at the time, and I didn't think Mercury Poisoning quite cut it on the same level, because it's obviously too direct and literal for what Squeezing Out Sparks is about, and too direct and literal for what most of my songs are about, which kind of go around the edges of things to make a point, you know. So anyway, there it was, and that was Mercury Poisoning. That's how that came about.
What was your experience like at Ariston? I mean, this was a huge step forward for you, being on that label, and Squeezing Out the Sparks is, for most of us, if not, you know, our favorite album, one of our absolute favorite albums from you. And as I was doing a little research this week, I realized that one of my favorite producers and arrangers worked with you on this album, and I'm really anxious to hear about your experiences recording it and working with Jack Nitzsche.
Jack Nitzsche,
and give us a little bio about Jack Nitzsche, because you know a lot about this guy.
Well, yeah, and strangely enough, at the time we decided, me and Dave, my manager, decided on Jack Nitzsche, I really didn't know the Phil Spector thing about him. I'm not a great student of who played keyboards on this and all that. That's not something I know a great deal about. There are a few specific things, but I didn't really realize the incredible history that this guy had as the arranger of Phil Spector and all that. And what I knew was I knew he was from the past, and I knew he had something to do with something, but I wasn't quite sure. I knew there was some credibility with him. But there was this record on the radio around 75, and it was almost credited with being the first new wave record, and it was by Mick DeVille, and it was called Mr. Jim. And it was a 3-chord pop song with, you know, a kind of retro attitude. So it was very different from what was in the charts in England, that was either a kind of sludgy progressive music or gimmick records by, you know, the Nolan twins or something. There was all these England always has a history of gimmick music, you know, which is very, very lightweight, bad music, you know. Was always in the charts, you know, and some plodding progressive bands, you know. It was all, you know, but he had a minor hit with this, and Jack Nitzsche produced it. And me and Dave saw this, and we liked the kind of irreverence of the production. And so somehow it was like, yeah, Jack Nitzsche, that's the guy. So he turned up in England, and I really didn't know much about him. The more we talked, the more I kind of got into it. When, you know, he worked with the Stones, and I'd seen his name on some of those early EPs that I'd had by the Stones. Like there's one, 21-something South Michigan Avenue, where they recorded.
That's stuff. The address of Chess Records.
Chess Records, they recorded. Jack Nitzsche would play with them on that. He played piano and stuff. He played tambourine on Satisfaction. You know, so I was like, that's good enough for me, you know. Right? Even though he plays it pretty badly at the time, it doesn't matter, you know. And then, you know, it was later on that I realized this guy used to arrange for Phil Spector as well, you know. So it was amazing working with him, because he came to England, and he didn't know what it was. I'd sent him a cassette that I'd done in a front room or something, you know, of some songs, Local Girls, and, you know, bits of songs, and he liked them, you know, or he wouldn't have come, and, you know, I guess he got a decent paycheck to be the producer, but he was still kind of miserable when he was there. He was having a love affair with an actress, Carrie Snodgrass, and he was really, he really would rather be with her than here, in miserable London where it was raining all the time, where in some basement studio, you know. But he did see some promise in the songs, but at first he didn't like the way the Rumour played, because the Rumour was such, they were very brilliant musicians, and because I was so green, they'd really done a lot of stuff on my earlier albums, like a lot of arrangements, they got a lot of things their way, they put a lot of their input in, which makes them so good. But Squeezing Out Sparks, he thought they were overdoing it, you know. So he tried to simplify it, and it took about 3 days before he really opened his mouth and said, Graham, I don't like the way your band plays. And I said, well, good, you're the producer, you know. Tell them what to do, let's do something different. I don't want to be the same as the other album. So, you know, he kind of simplified everything and made me play the songs in front of them and said, why aren't you doing what Graham's doing? You know, you're not doing that. You're trying to do something else with it, you guys. You're trying to do something for you and not for him. So he was a really blindingly epiphany kind of moment, you know. And so they started to do that with putting their own signature things in, but keeping it, really following the rhythmic structures of what I was doing. Discovering Japan is not an easy song, and they couldn't get it right. Nobody could get it right. And it just didn't sound like a good song. And he heard me, I played it on acoustic, and it had this dum, dum, and he said, why aren't people doing that? And he said, do this on the drums, something. And it just fell into place, and we recorded it, and suddenly this thing's coming through the speakers, and it's like, everyone went like that, they really did. It's like, this is something different now, you know. And the albums then took 11 days to record, do the whole thing. So Jack Nitzsche was, you know, the most inspiring producer for me ever. And I produced my albums since 1988. I decided, I've had it with producers, I kept going back to different producers. I'm going to be the producer, use an engineer. And I basically used his method, which is, this is the song, you're doing what I'm doing, you know. And that's the way I've done it. And everything has been relatively easy since then. Instead of getting a producer who turns up, hears the songs and puts their own view on them, you know, and takes it somewhere, and it's like, what is, you know, and I lose track of what's going on. So that Jack Nitzsche is really important in that sense.
Is Squeezing Out Sparks one of your personal favorite albums you've ever done? It sure sounds like it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing with most artists is the favorite is the one you've just done or the one you're about to do, which you haven't written the songs for yet. You know? But I know that it's a very unique album and very strong and powerful. So, you know, I'm not going to say, no, it's not good, or, you know, that would be foolish. I mean, Howling Wind is I know that is a powerful album because it was my first album. You've got a lifetime of energy in there, you know, and you can't beat that. You know, if you make a great first album, then that's something that should be good forever, you know. So I understand the worth of these records, and I'm proud of them. But, you know, basically, it's not. I don't kind of live in the past. So I'm just constantly worried about the next one, you know? About, oh God, I got to write songs, what it's going to be like. You know?
Let's return to the subject that we began with your songs being used in you know, elsewhere in television shows. There are some people, you know, who have just this, you know, violently, you know, just have a huge problem with artists who do that or sell their songs to
not many these days. Yeah, Bruce Springsteen, who can afford to. Yeah, if I was him, I wouldn't have my songs used. Who needs it? You know, whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Tom Waits is another one who really decries people.
Good for him. You know, but I mean, I don't think so. I've always loved TV. I've always loved TV, and I love, you know, jingles. Jingles are great. You know, I could be a great jingle writer. I know I could, you know. I just don't want to get into the business of being, you know, working for a paycheck as a jingle writer, or I would do, you know. I'd rather be free, you know. But one of the things that struck me, this is a thing why I've always thought music on TV and on adverts was cool, is when the Stones, the very early days of the Stones, okay, talking about 63, 64, around then, you know, when they emerged, an advert came on English TV for Rice Krispies. Snap, Crackle and Pop Rice Krispies, right? You have those here, right? Rice Krispies? Yeah. Okay. And there was a band playing, go, get up in the morning with the snapper in my band, get up in the morning, get up and go, Rice Krispies. And I thought, that sounds like the Stones. And of course there was no communication systems then, you know, and nobody could read it, no internet, nothing. So me and some friends said, is that the Stones? We didn't know. And the advert wasn't on for very long, a few months or so it was on, and it was great. And it wasn't until YouTube came along that somebody sent me a link and said, check this out, and it was Rice Krispies, and it was the Rolling Stones. Because their manager, Andrew Lou Goldham, had said, we should do this, we should do something for an advert. You know, so I've always thought it was cool. And I've never had a song used on an advert, and I'm just like, come on, please. You know, a really successful advert, you know, I hope. But, you know, so I have no problem with any of that at all. I think, you know, and I've never, you know, sold millions of records, so, you know, I've got no problem with earning a living, you know, it's basically, you know, I'd like to, thank you. So,